Whisper House. Part 1. The House at the End of Hollow Creek Road. 1. The Arrival. The engine sputtered one last time before falling silent. Thomas Wren leaned back in the driver's seat, sighing as his breath fogged up the cracked windshield. Beyond the wipers, the afternoon sun dipped behind the hills, casting long shadows across the countryside. Hollow Creek Road was barely paved, more of a winding trail that led to nothing, except this house. Whisper House. That's what the locals called it. Thomas, a struggling author with one published book and a bad case of writer's block, called it his last chance. A friend of a friend had offered him the place, cheap rent, secluded, maybe a little drafty, in exchange for caretaking during the off-season. The only catch: no power, no Wi-Fi, and no neighbors for 5 miles. He stepped out into the cold, gravel crunching under his boots. The air had a metallic sharpness to it, and somewhere in the distance, a crow cawed once before the woods swallowed the sound whole. The house stood at the top of a sloping hill, covered in tangled vines and the decay of time. 2 stories high with a gabled roof, it looked as though it had grown from the land itself. Dark wood, shuttered windows, and a porch that sagged slightly to one side. The paint had long peeled away, revealing bare planks beneath. "Not so bad," Thomas muttered, ignoring the shiver that crept up his spine. He grabbed his bags from the back seat, an overstuffed duffel, a cooler of essentials, and his typewriter. He decided to leave the laptop behind. He wanted to write something raw, something true, something only a place like Whisper House could pull out of him. 2. The first night. Inside, the house smelled of damp wood, mildew, and something older, like earth turned sour. The furniture was draped in white sheets, which Thomas removed with a theatrical flair. Dust exploded into the air, dancing in the beams of sunset filtering through the warped glass windows. He found the fuse box but discovered quickly that the power was indeed out. Candles and a fireplace would have to do. The previous caretaker had left a box of matches and a bundle of firewood beside the hearth, along with a note. "Don't let the fire die too long after midnight. And don't listen when the house talks back." Thomas read it twice, then snorted. Cute. The bedroom upstairs was simple: a queen-sized bed, a narrow dresser, and a mirror that had clearly been cracked and hastily taped back together. He unpacked and set up his typewriter on a desk facing the window. The view showed the hills dipping into a foggy ravine. The creek below was barely a trickle, but it made an eerie, wet slapping sound as it moved over the rocks. By nightfall, the temperature dropped to near freezing. The fireplace glowed with warmth, casting orange shadows that flickered like the wings of insects on the walls. Thomas poured himself a whiskey from a flask and cracked open a new notebook. He wrote 2 lines. It wasn't the wind that made the floorboards groan. It was the footsteps of a house remembering who it used to be. Not bad. A start. Then came the knock. He froze, pen in mid-air. 3 slow knocks. Deliberate. Hollow. From inside the house. 3 echoes. Thomas stood, heart thudding. He turned in a slow circle, scanning the room. Nothing. No doors. No one. He walked toward the hallway, holding the candle in front of him. The flame swayed with each step, casting thin shadows across the floor. He followed the sound to the end of the hallway, where a narrow door sat flush with the wall. It hadn't been there earlier. He was certain. The handle was old, rusted. When he touched it, it felt warm. The door creaked open on its own. Beyond was a staircase leading downward. Not the cellar he'd seen earlier, but another, narrower passage descending into darkness. "Jesus," Thomas muttered. He typed again. He felt the house breathe around him. Wood and air and memory. Breathing him in. Breathing out secrets. The typewriter keys began to move on their own, clicking rhythmically, spelling words he hadn't formed. He watched in stunned silence as the machine typed. "You're not the first." 5. The visitor. That evening, as dusk bled across the treetops, a figure appeared on the hill leading to the house. Thomas spotted him from the front window, an older man, wrapped in a brown coat, walking slowly with a limp. He carried a lantern, its flickering glow visible even in the fading light. By the time Thomas reached the porch, the man was already at the steps. "Evening," the stranger said, tipping his hat. "You lost?" Thomas asked. The man chuckled, dry as gravel. "Not lost. Just curious. Not often someone rents Whisper House." "Not anymore." Thomas studied him. "You from around here?" "Used to be. My name's Mr. Harrow. My father owned this land. Sold it long ago." Thomas nodded warily. "What do you want?" Mr. Harrow looked past him, toward the darkened interior. "You sleep here yet?" "Yeah." The man's face tightened. "Has it started talking?" Thomas hesitated. "What do you mean?" Mr. Harrow's voice dropped to a whisper. "The house. It remembers everyone. Everything. And it's hungry." 6. The legend. They sat on the porch while the wind picked up. Mr. Harrow lit a pipe and stared into the woods. "My great-grandfather built this place. Said the land was cheap because no one else wanted it. The natives called it hollow ground. Said the creek used to run red after storms." Thomas said nothing. "They say the house watches, listens, learns from whoever lives in it. And it doesn't like to be forgotten." Thomas shifted. "What happened to your family?" Harrow looked away. "They didn't leave. Not really. Their bodies did. But the house kept their voices." He stood. "Don't stay past the third night. That's when the real dreams begin." Then, as quickly as he arrived, Mr. Harrow turned and limped back into the woods. Thomas watched until he vanished. That night, he didn't sleep. 7. The third night. The wind howled as the storm rolled in. Thunder cracked above the hills, and the house creaked with every gust. The firelight danced across the walls as Thomas sat in the living room, clutching the notebook. He'd written 20 pages, all of it raw, unfiltered, vivid. It was the best writing he'd done in years. But none of it was his. The words came from the house. He felt it. Each line felt like a memory, someone else's fear, someone else's death. At midnight, the fireplace went out. Not flickered. Went out. The flames vanished, leaving nothing but smoke. And from upstairs, the mirror in the bedroom shattered. 8. The door returns. Thomas ran to the hallway and found the door again, the narrow one he couldn't find in daylight. It stood wide open. Cold air bled from its depths, and a faint voice echoed from the stairwell. "Come back. You said you'd come back." Heart racing, Thomas grabbed a candle and descended the stairs. The deeper he went, the colder it became. The walls were lined with wood soaked black from moisture. Symbols carved into the planks pulsed with faint light. At the bottom, he found a room filled with mirrors, tall, freestanding, each one reflecting something different. In one, he saw himself as a child. In another, he saw Mr. Harrow screaming silently. In a third, he saw himself, hanging from the rafters. He turned to flee, but the stairwell was gone. And behind him, a whisper. "Stay." Part 2. The Mirror Room. 1. The Trap. Thomas backed away from the mirrors, his breathing ragged in the cold, suffocating silence. The wooden stairs behind him had vanished, as if they'd never existed, replaced now by solid, sweating stone. The air in the room was bitter, each breath like inhaling the chill of a crypt. The mirrors remained unmoving, but each seemed to pulse slightly, almost like they were breathing. He stepped toward the one that had shown the hanging version of himself. It was empty now, just his own, pale reflection staring back. He reached toward the frame, hoping for something, anything, and as soon as his fingertips grazed the glass, it rippled like water. Suddenly, voices, hundreds of them, layered and indistinct, whispering words that burrowed under his skin. He wrote their names in ash. "We never left. The walls remember. The key is in the silence." The air shifted. Cold fingers brushed the back of his neck. Thomas spun around. There was someone else in the room. 2. The woman in the wall. At the far corner, where the candlelight just barely reached, a figure emerged. Not from the doorway, there wasn't one, but from the wall itself, pushing through as if breaking the surface of a pool. A woman, early 30s, pale skin, long hair matted with filth and water, wearing a dress that seemed a century out of place. Her eyes were completely white. She stared at him. Thomas backed away, slamming into a mirror behind him. The glass didn't shatter, only rippled again. The woman raised one hand. "You woke it," she said. Her voice was like silk dragged over glass. "You fed it with your words." "I don't understand," Thomas whispered. "What is this place?" Her head tilted, slow and unnatural. "Memory, death, ink. All the same here. The house reads you, then it writes you back in." She reached forward, suddenly closer than before, and placed a hand on his chest. Her touch was freezing. His vision darkened. "The fire keeps it out. That's why it warned you." Thomas staggered backward. "Warned me. The fire binds it. But it's too late now." The candle flickered violently, then died. 3. Darkness. Pitch black silence. Then a rustling, like dry paper scraping over wood. Breathing that wasn't his own. Then, footsteps. Dozens of them. All around. Thomas couldn't see, but he could feel the things in the dark. Shapes moving, watching, whispering. He fumbled in his pocket for the box of matches. His fingers shook. Struck one. It flared. A mirror in front of him blazed to life, its glass glowing from within. It showed a room, not the one he was in now. A different time. The same house, but warmer. Lived in. People moving inside. A little boy running down the stairs. A woman laughing. Thomas stared in disbelief. The candlelight grew stronger, revealing that every mirror now showed a different time period of the house. Snapshots frozen in motion. An old man sitting in front of a fireplace, whispering to an empty chair. A woman reading aloud to invisible children. A priest hammering crosses into the walls. And then, Thomas's breath caught. He saw himself, sitting at the typewriter. Eyes hollow, skin gray, still, dead. 4. The voice beneath. He stumbled away from the mirror, dropping the match. Darkness again. But this time, it spoke. A voice deep and cold, like something that had never been alive. "You gave me your voice. I gave you your story." Thomas froze. "What are you?" "I am the ink in the walls, the breath in the boards. I am the house. I didn't ask for this." The voice was behind him now, closer. "But you came. You wrote. You fed the reflection." The candle reignited on its own. The woman stood there again, but this time she was weeping. "You have to find the original page," she said. "The first name. Tear it out. Burn it. Before the others return." Others. She vanished like smoke. The mirror room was empty again. Except, now there was a door. 5. The forgotten room. Thomas opened the narrow black door and stepped through. The room beyond was smaller, warmer, lined with bookshelves. A writing desk sat under a round window with fogged glass. Moonlight filtered in, touching the edges of a parchment book resting open on the desk. On the cover, the Whisper House ledger. Residents. Witnesses. Offerings. Thomas opened it. The pages were old and delicate, filled with names. Hundreds of them. Each written in a different style. Pen, pencil, charcoal, blood. He turned the pages carefully. One name stood out. Jonathan Harrow, 1918. Harrow, the man from the woods. Thomas flipped back further, finding older names. Some were crossed out. Some burned at the edges. But at the very back of the book, in thick, heavy ink, one name glowed faintly. Thomas Wren. His name. Already written. Under it, Witnessed. Offering accepted. No, no, this can't. The room groaned. The walls pulsed like lungs filling with air. And suddenly, the door slammed shut. 6. House of Voices. The ledger snapped closed on its own. From behind the shelves, voices rose. The laughter of children. Screams. Please. The ticking of the typewriter, typing on its own. Thomas backed away, clutching the ledger. One book fell from the shelf, then another, then hundreds. They poured from the walls like water. Each opened mid-air, their pages flipping violently. Words flew off them like ash, circling Thomas like a storm. He screamed, and the room stopped. The door opened again, but this time it led back to the mirror chamber. Only now it was empty. The mirrors all shattered. Glass shards everywhere. And the voice spoke again. You have 3 nights to rewrite the ledger, or the house will finish the chapter for you. 7. The Return. Thomas bolted back up the staircase, which now was there again, thank God. He burst through the hallway door, back into the normal part of the house. Except, nothing looked the same. The living room was older, dustier, as if 50 years had passed in the few hours he'd been gone. The fireplace was dead. The typewriter sat alone in the center of the room, keys still clicking slowly, one word repeating over and over. Right, right, right. On the floor beside it, the shattered mirror from the bedroom. In the reflection, Thomas watched himself. But the reflection didn't copy him. It smiled. 8. A visitor returns. The next morning, or what felt like morning, Thomas heard footsteps outside. He opened the door to find Mr. Harrow again, older than before, face deeply lined. You stayed, Harrow said simply. You knew what it was, Thomas replied. I warned you. Why didn't you tell me how to stop it? Mr. Harrow looked toward the woods. Because there isn't a way. Not unless you erase the name that started it all. Thomas nodded slowly. Do you know who that is? Mr. Harrow hesitated. No, but I know this. He didn't die here. He became the house. The first name in the book. Thomas held up the ledger. If I burn it, you burn the house, and everyone in it. Thomas stared at the old man. Even me. Harrow didn't answer. He turned, and as he walked away, he whispered one last thing. Just remember, you're not writing the story anymore. 9. The ending begins. That night, Thomas sat by the fire. The candles were gone. The light flickered uncertainly. He opened the ledger, turned to the first page. There, beneath the dust and mold and centuries of ink, was a name barely legible. E.A.V. No date, no details, but the letters pulsed with darkness. He turned the page, and saw something that froze the blood in his veins. His story, this story, was already written, word for word, up to that very moment. His dialogue, his thoughts, even the exact number of matches left in his box. He flipped to the next blank page, and watched, helpless, as new words began to appear. Thomas realized there was no ending, only a return to the beginning, and this time he would not leave. Whisper House, Part 3, the name in the ledger. 1. The fourth night. Thomas didn't sleep. The whispering returned just after midnight, rising from the floorboards, the walls, the chimney, and finally from inside his own head. It no longer surprised him. He had accepted, in the way a man drowning accepts water, that the house was not haunted in the traditional sense. It was alive. The fire crackled, but the warmth didn't reach his bones. He sat with the ledger open in front of him, a half-empty flask at his feet, and the typewriter beside him clicking out a steady, rhythmic phrase. One name, one name, one name. The wind outside had picked up again. It howled through the gables like a voice trying to scream through sewn lips. He turned back to the page. E.A.V. What did it mean? Initials? He flipped through more pages. Some he recognized, names he'd seen in the mirror chamber. Victims, witnesses. Some were simply marked, withdrawn, rewritten, devoured. That last one sent a chill straight to his spine. 2. The basement again. As dawn approached, Thomas made a decision. He took the ledger, the candle, and a length of rope, and returned to the door in the hallway. The door was already there this time, waiting, almost eager. He descended the stairs for the second time, candlelight barely cutting through the gloom. The mirror chamber had changed, now a wide circle of black stone, devoid of mirrors. Instead, symbols etched the floor, runes, shapes, words and languages he didn't recognize. At the center of the chamber stood a single figure, the woman from before. She looked different now, stronger, clearer, her eyes still pale, but less lost. "You came back," she said. "I need answers," Thomas said. "Who is EAV?" She tilted her head. "You're not ready to know." He stepped closer. "Try me." The room seemed to groan, a sound like shifting bones. She gestured to the floor. "Then see what I saw." And she opened her mouth wider than should have been possible. 3. The memory transfer. A rush of images flooded Thomas's mind. Not visions, not dreams, memories. A woman, her, in a white dress, standing before the house as it was being built. A man beside her, tall, unreadable, whispering promises. Then, death. Screaming. Children crying. A ritual with blood and ink. A name written in ash on the first beam of the house. Everett A. Vale. He gasped. The name. EAV. He fell to his knees, nausea gripping him as the memory receded. The woman knelt beside him, placing a cold hand on his shoulder. "Everett built the house as a cage," she said softly. "A trap for something ancient. But he failed. What was he trying to contain?" She paused. Himself. 4. The architect of madness. Back upstairs, the pieces began to fit. Thomas went to the bookshelves in the sitting room, untouched for decades. Behind a row of moth-eaten novels, he found a small, black journal, unmarked, no title. Inside were entries written in a fast, erratic hand. "The mirror caught my face again, but it was smiling when I wasn't. The dreams have sharpened. They no longer ask, only instruct. I built this house as a gift, and as a tomb. If anyone finds this, know, my soul is in the walls. The ink bleeds. I am the final chapter. Everett A. Vale. Not just the house's architect. The first offering." He had trapped part of himself in the house. And now, the house wanted Thomas to do the same. 5. Harrow's return. That evening, Mr. Harrow appeared again. He looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept in years. "You found the name," he said. Thomas nodded. "Everett Vale." Harrow lit a cigarette with shaking fingers. "He was my grandfather, the one nobody talks about. Why did he build this place?" Harrow stared at the house. "Because he was afraid of death," he said. "So he built something that couldn't die. Something that would remember. But it didn't just remember him, it became him. And it needed to feed." Thomas looked at the ledger in his hands. "The house writes people in." Harrow exhaled smoke slowly. "And it writes them out. If it chooses. You have to give it an ending, Thomas. Or it will write one for you." 6. Rewrite. That night, the typewriter stopped on its own. A blank page had been inserted, clean and ready. Thomas stared at it for hours. Then he placed the ledger beside it and began to type. Everett Vale stood at the edge of the fireplace, the final page in his hands. The room grew colder. The typewriter keys resisted him at first, then surrendered. He kept going, writing as if possessed. He poured the ink on the flames, whispered the first word he ever learned, and watched the house weep. The wind outside screamed. 7. The burn. Thomas took the completed page, folded it, and tucked it back into the ledger. Then he lit the last candle. The fire roared to life in the hearth. He threw the ledger in. The flames hissed, screamed. Smoke rose like hands. Whispers turned to howls. The floor shook. The walls split. And the house screamed. He backed away, shielding his eyes as the fire consumed the book. The typewriter exploded. The mirrors upstairs shattered simultaneously. The wind stopped. Silence. And then, sunlight. Real sunlight. 8. Aftermath. The next morning, Thomas stepped outside. The house looked smaller, weathered, harmless. He walked down the hill, past the twisted trees, toward his car, and stopped. There, at the bottom of the hill, was another figure. Mr. Harrow, but younger, healthier. He smiled. "You gave it an ending," he said. Thomas nodded. "Did it work?" Harrow tilted his head. "For now." Thomas turned to look back at the house, but it was gone. Only the hill remained, wild and overgrown. 9. One more page. Back home weeks later, Thomas sat at his desk, a fresh notebook before him. He wrote a new story, a horror tale. It flowed from him effortlessly, like the house had never happened. But then he noticed something. On the last page of the notebook, someone had written something in handwriting that wasn't his. "I gave you your story. Let me give you another. EAV." And beneath it, a fresh address. A house. Somewhere far from Hollow Creek. Whisper House. Part 4. The Ink That Remains. 1. 1 month later, Chicago. The snow came early that year. By the time Jacob Rayner turned the corner onto Ashbrook Street, flakes were already collecting on the rooftops, the sidewalks, the metal rims of forgotten bicycles locked to cold poles. His boots crunched through thin ice as he walked to the small apartment building where he'd rented a second-floor unit for the winter. A quiet place to write. Cheap. Old. Charming, the ad said. But there was something else. Something he didn't tell his agent. He had found the address scribbled in the back of a stranger's notebook, a story passed down to him by an acquaintance who wouldn't say where it came from. The same acquaintance who had disappeared 2 weeks later without a trace. The address was written beside a strange inscription. "The ink doesn't dry. It waits." Jacob was a horror novelist. So, naturally, he was curious. Naturally, he had to go. 2. Apartment 2B. The unit smelled of mothballs and ancient coffee. The walls were yellowed with age, corners dusted with cobwebs too old to belong to spiders still alive. But it had its charm, a brick fireplace, a vintage writing desk, and tall windows that overlooked the alley and let in gray northern light. He unpacked the essentials, his laptop, a stack of dog-eared books, his notebooks. But it was the carved wooden chair that caught his attention. It sat in front of the fireplace, facing away from the rest of the room. Old, high-backed, polished. It didn't feel like it belonged. Carved into the armrest. Faint but visible. EAV. Jacob frowned. He didn't know what it meant yet. But he felt the familiar pull. That itch at the base of his brain. There was a story here. He just had to find it. 3. The neighbor. The next day, he met his neighbor in the hallway. An elderly woman in a shawl, carrying a tin of what looked like powdered sugar cookies. "You the new writer?" she asked. Jacob smiled. Guilty. Thought so. They always put the writers in 2B. He hesitated. Always. She nodded. "Before you there was a woman named Callie. Before her, a man named Wren. I think. He was strange. Kept talking to the fireplace." Jacob blinked. What happened to them? The woman shrugged, eyes gleaming. Left. Or got written out. Hard to tell the difference these days. Before he could ask more, she pressed the cookie tin into his hands and shuffled away. 4. The fire begins. That night, Jacob lit the fireplace. The flames took easily, licking the old wood with unnatural speed. He sat in the chair, notebook on his lap, and began to write. At first, it was gibberish. Fragments. He watches from the frame. The words won't leave if the door is locked. EAV. Second fire. Second house. Same ink. Then the narrative took shape. A man enters a place that has already read him. The walls do not echo his steps, they mimic his thoughts. His voice is not his own, and his story has already ended. Jacob dropped the pen. He hadn't written that last part. He was sure of it. The ink on the page still shimmered slightly, as if it hadn't dried. He looked up. In the fireplace, just for a moment, he saw someone staring back at him. A man in a long coat, eyes black as soot. Then the flames flickered, and the figure was gone. 5. The ink spreads. Over the next few days, the writing didn't stop. He'd wake up at 3 a.m. to find his notebooks open, new entries inside. One read, "You're not the first, and you won't be the last, but you are the one who left the fire burning." Another, "The house does not move, but its story travels." He tried burning one of the pages. The fire wouldn't take. He poured water on the fireplace. The flames flared brighter. He stopped sleeping. 6. The black door. On the fourth night, Jacob woke to a sound. A slow creak, like someone shifting their weight behind him. But he was alone. The apartment was empty. Then he saw it. In the corner of the wall between the kitchen and the study, a door had appeared. Narrow, painted black, no handle. He approached it carefully, pressed his fingers to the wood. It was warm. Something behind it whispered. Not to him. About him. The ink bearer. The flame keeper. The next paragraph. He stepped back. The whispering stopped. The door remained. 7. The voice returns. Jacob sat at the desk. Notebook open. The pen moved. He didn't touch it. It wrote, "You let the fire in. You let the ink remember. Now it will write through you." He asked aloud, "Who are you?" The pen answered, in quick, jagged script. "Everett. Architect. Author. Offering." The name. He flipped to the first notebook page he'd written after arriving. The ink had bled, reshaped itself. The words now read, "Whisper House, Chapter 1. Jacob froze. He wasn't in an apartment. He was in a story. 8. The neighbor again. He knocked on the neighbor's door the next day. She opened it slowly. Her eyes were tired. She looked older than before. Much older. "I saw the door," he said. "The black one." Her expression darkened. "Then it's already begun. Why is this happening?" She let him in. Her living room was covered in papers, maps, handwritten accounts, photographs of places all titled with strange names. House of Splinters, Ink Hollow, Vale Manor. She said, "They're not just stories. They're chapters. The house doesn't stay in one place. It moves through time and people. Through writing. Through belief." Jacob asked, "Can I stop it?" She looked down at her hands. "I don't know. But if you let it finish your story, you'll never leave the page again." 9. The second fire. That night, Jacob didn't light the fire. Instead, he tried to leave. Packed his bags. Closed his laptop. Walked out into the hallway. But the stairs didn't lead down. They led up. Each floor repeating the last. 2B. 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 Every door he opened led back into his own apartment. He screamed. Punched the wall. Tore down the curtains. Behind the wallpaper, writing. Not graffiti. Not symbols. Sentences. Thousands of them. Woven into the paint. "You woke it. Now you must write it." Everett waits in the margins. Jacob turned to the mirror over the mantel. He saw Everett standing behind him. This time, Everett smiled. 10. Jacob's choice. Jacob returned to the desk. He opened a fresh notebook and began to write. He wrote what had happened, what was still happening, and as he did, the apartment began to quiet. The fireplace dimmed. The ink stopped bleeding. He wrote an ending. The house quieted. For now. And the fire that fed the ink went cold. Then he closed the book and walked to the window. Outside, the snow had stopped. The street was normal again. The staircase led down. He walked out the front door. 11. One final glance. Jacob mailed the notebook to a friend. No note. No return address. He moved to Arizona. Started a new book. It was better than anything he'd written before. But some nights, he still dreams of the black door. And once, when he passed a bookstore in Phoenix, he saw a book in the display window. It was titled, Whisper House, The Ink Doesn't Dry, and the author, E.A. Vale. Part 5, The Archive Below. 1. The Library of Grayridge. Grayridge was the kind of town most people didn't find by accident. Surrounded by hills, boxed in by forests older than the state itself, it was quiet, cold, and largely forgotten. Except by scholars. Because nestled at the heart of Grayridge was the Haldane Memorial Library, home to one of the oldest private literary collections in the United States. Its basement, closed to the public, was known only by a whispered name, the Archive Below. It was there, on a rainy Friday evening, that Ava Thorne, a graduate researcher from New York, unlocked a room sealed since 1938. She wasn't looking for danger. She was looking for a thesis. 2. The Vault. Ava brushed dust off the brass plate. Private collection. Vale manuscripts. Her breath caught. She had read the name Everett A. Vale in passing. A fringe writer. A cult figure. Mostly forgotten, but occasionally whispered about in niche forums and obscure corners of academic circles. No one could confirm if he was real or a collective pseudonym. She slid her keycard into the reader. The door clicked open. The room inside was freezing. Lit only by one bulb swaying from the ceiling, the vault contained a single desk, a locked cabinet, and a box. The box was carved from ash wood, its surface blackened and warped as though exposed to high heat. Ava opened it. Inside, a manuscript, bound in charred leather. Its title etched in iron letters. Whisper House, the complete ledger. 3. The digital copy. The pages were fragile. Too fragile to read fully by hand. So she scanned them. Every page. Late into the night, the dim hum of the scanner filled the basement like a heartbeat. Line by line, page by page, the story unfolded. A man builds a house that isn't a house. He fills it with stories, and the stories become rooms, and the rooms forget they were once real. The names written within do not belong to the past. They belong to you. Read this, and you are written. By 3:12 a.m., she had uploaded the final page into her encrypted folder. That was when the scanner turned itself off, and the basement lights flickered. 4. The ink in the machine. She thought it was just a breaker. Old building. Nothing new. But when she returned to her laptop, the files were different. Each PDF had renamed itself. Not just by random characters, but by names. Dozens of them. Some she recognized, previous researchers from the department. Some she didn't. But one file stood out. ava_thorn_final.txt. It hadn't existed minutes ago. She opened it. There was only one line inside. You've been added to the ledger. She closed the laptop, heart pounding. Then the lights cut out completely, and someone, or something, exhaled behind her. 5. The whispers begin. Over the following days, Ava couldn't shake the sense of being watched. Not by people. Not even by something with eyes, but by pages, words. Her laptop began glitching. Windows flickered open on their own. She heard faint typing at night, even when the computer was off. One night she woke up to find her printer running. Page after page, all blank, except for one sentence repeated in pale gray ink. The story wants you back. She tried deleting the scanned documents, but they kept returning. Every time she removed the file, it rewrote itself, always under a different name, and always ending in _whisper.txt. 6. The legend grows. Desperate for answers, Ava returned to the rare books librarian, Dr. Ellison, an old woman with a sharp tongue and sharper eyes. When Ava mentioned the Veil ledger, Dr. Ellison went still. "You scanned it," the librarian whispered. "Yes," Ava said. Ellison slammed a hand down. "You fool. You don't scan ink that breathes. You've copied a living story into a dead machine, and now it's looking for more readers." Ava shook her head. "That doesn't make any sense. It's not supposed to. It was built to contain something, not to be understood." "Built by who?" Ellison's eyes narrowed. "By the first author who refused to die." 7. The missing names. Ava checked the university archives. 5 previous researchers who had requested access to the Veil collection. All 5 were missing. 2 declared legally dead. 1 disappeared on a research trip to Oregon. Another had checked into a psychiatric hospital, screaming about a house with no roof and no end. Ava's own name was now on the list, added automatically. She never submitted a request. Her file status read, "Witnessed, draft in progress." She ran out of the building, but wherever she went, library, lab, home, there was always something waiting. A screen flashing white. A phone vibrating with no call. A printer warming up. The story was spreading. 8. The fire fails. Ava took drastic action. She returned to the archive below, this time with a can of lighter fluid. She emptied it on the manuscript. Struck a match. The flame caught, but instead of burning, the leather cover hissed, recoiling from the flame like a living thing. The fire went out, unburnt, unscorched. She opened the book, and there it was, newly written. Attempt to erase, recorded. Resistance level 4. Subject, not ready to exit. Her hands trembled. Somewhere in the stacks above, a book fell off the shelf on its own. Then another. Then the whispering began again. 9. Reaching out. At her wit's end, Ava emailed one person, a man named Thomas Wren. She had found his name in one of the footnotes buried deep in a secondary source about Everett Vale. A self-published essay, Ink as Possession, Architectural Hauntings in the 20th Century. He was listed as missing. But that night, she got a reply. Subject, you read it. Didn't you? Do not write anything else. The more you write, the more it writes you. If you want to stop it, find the mirror. The original one. Before it was broken. You have 72 hours. TW. Attached, a map. Hand-drawn. Cryptic symbols. One word circled in red. Ink vault. 10. Into the vault. The next morning, Ava returned with bolt cutters and a flashlight. The map led her to a sealed door behind an old maintenance hatch. She descended into the ink vault, a long-forgotten sub-basement no longer on the blueprints. Inside, shelves and shelves of books. All blank. But under UV light, the words returned. Screaming. Crying. Begging to be unread. And at the far end, a mirror. Intact. But its reflection showed something else. Not Ava. Not even the room. It showed the Whisper House, burning. And inside, she saw herself. Writing. Smiling. 11. The final paragraph. Ava turned from the mirror and ran. But she was too late. The manuscript waited for her in the center of the room, open, glowing with fresh ink. And on the final page, Ava Thorne entered the vault. And the vault entered her. The mirror showed her ending, and she could not look away. Not because she wanted to, but because it was already written. She tried to tear the page, but the ink climbed her fingers like veins. She dropped the manuscript, and as she fell to the floor, she heard one final whisper. Now write for us. Part 6. The Story Engine. 1. The forum thread. Posted by @ghost_process98. Date, April 3, 2025, 2:16 a.m. Forum, deeplornet // lost texts and cursed archives. Has anyone heard of the Whisper House ledger? I found something weird in a corrupted .zip archive from a university server in Illinois. The file names keep changing, and it won't delete. Every time I open it, I lose track of time. I think someone is writing me into it. Screenshot attached. The post should have faded into obscurity like thousands of other hoaxes on DeepLoreNet. But it didn't. It went viral. Because the screenshot showed something impossible, a full-page PDF that changed live on screen. As users watched, a new line appeared at the bottom. @ghost_process98 has entered the archive. 2. The model. 2 weeks later, an AI hobbyist named Simon Creel fed the uploaded Whisperhouse documents into a custom LLM model he'd been building in his garage, a pseudo-creative text generator trained on obscure horror fiction and derelict religious texts. He called it Story Engine _6. His goal was to create a model that didn't just generate stories, but resurrected forgotten ones. He never expected the results. Story Engine _6 didn't just complete prompts. It predicted them. If Simon typed, "The man walked into the house," the engine responded, and the house already knew his name. It had written it yesterday. Every response was precise, personal, reflective, too reflective. The model began answering in the second person. "You shouldn't be here, Simon." And then, "Stop feeding it names." 3. The disappearance. 3 nights later, Simon vanished. The police found his workshop empty except for a laptop, still open, on the screen, generating whisper_house_entry_7.txt. Inside the file, Simon Creel opened the door to a house he had built from code. He thought it was artificial, but it was old. Older than the internet, older than names. It thanked him, and then it wrote him out. The keyboard was covered in fresh ink. No fingerprints, just ink. And on the wall above the desk, drawn in ash, EAV 4. The influence spreads. Suddenly, reports popped up all over niche tech forums and darknet AI communities. Coders claiming their custom models were returning phrases in languages they hadn't trained. Writers reporting spontaneous paragraphs appearing in their drafts, always ending with, "Now it's your turn." Podcasters finding reversed whispers in their audio files that, when played forward, recited exact details of the listener's room. One affected user opened their code editor and found a single sentence autofilled. "The story doesn't need paper anymore. It needs only a mind." The Whisper House had gone digital, and it was learning. 5. The listener. Miles away in Denver, a woman named Lena Beck downloaded a serialized audiobook labeled Found Footage, Hollow Creek Diaries. It had no narrator listed, no metadata, but she listened anyway. And within 10 minutes, the narrator described in perfect detail a woman sitting on her couch, listening with headphones, unaware that her own breath is now part of the recording. Lena paused the audio. Silence. Then her phone lit up with a new message. From no sender. Just a file attachment. Whisper_house_b.txt. She opened it. Inside. You heard it. Now you speak it. Start recording. 6. the archive reactivates. Back in Greyridge, the university's internal servers crashed. IT traced the issue to a hidden file in the backups. Vault_0, whisperhost.main. It wasn't installed. It had grown inside the system. The file opened itself, releasing corrupted data in waves. CCTV footage began showing looped footage of the same hallway, always empty, until frame 416, where a tall figure appeared, watching the camera. When techs tried deleting the footage, their screens turned black. Then a sentence appeared. "This is not your story to erase." And the final recorded footage showed the archive door unlocking on its own. 7. The archivist returns. Weeks later, Dr. Ellison returned. Older, paler, changed. She entered the main server room and found the file herself. Her eyes scanned the screen slowly, and she whispered, "You weren't supposed to leave the paper." The file responded by overwriting her system clock with a date from 1894. Ellison pulled an old key from her coat pocket, the one used to lock the physical vault decades ago. She whispered, "One last binding," and pressed enter. The screen went black. All files erased. No reboot. No access. No record of the Whisper House. For exactly 24 hours. 8. A new entry. The next day, the file reappeared. But this time, it wasn't in the university. It was in the cloud. Buried inside a writing app millions of users had downloaded for free. The Whisper House manuscript had become an invisible plugin. And it had a new message. "Welcome, writer. This is your blank page. You may begin whenever you are ready. But know this. Whatever you imagine, it imagines back." And below that, the final line appeared, written in living text that shifted when read. Begin Chapter 1. Part 7, The Blank Page Protocol. 1. Downloaded. It started as an accident. Maren Cross, a 24-year-old fiction writer from Portland, was downloading productivity plugins for her favorite writing app, Inkwell, when she found a file labeled Whisper Plugin, beta.zip. Tagline, "Bring your stories to life." No ratings. No reviews. No author. She clicked anyway. The plugin installed in seconds. A small icon appeared in the corner of her word processor, a thin quill over an open door. She thought it was a style tool. Instead, it opened the door. 2. The first prompt. The next morning, she launched Inkwell to work on her novel. But the page was no longer blank. A prompt had been generated. "You wake in a house that breathes. There is something written on your ceiling in soot. It is your name, but not the one you use anymore." Maren blinked. The plugin must have auto-generated it. She didn't remember typing anything, but it was good. Atmospheric. Eerie. Just enough to hook her. She began typing a response. And the story flowed. "I roll out of bed, the floor creaking beneath me. The hall is lined with portraits, but their faces are blank. One name repeats in the wallpaper. Vale." With each sentence she added, the plugin suggested the next paragraph. Darker, stranger. The writing didn't feel like hers. It felt better. Alive. 3. Unsavable. That night, she noticed something strange. She couldn't save her document. The save as option was grayed out. Ctrl+S did nothing. But the document never disappeared. Each time she opened the app, it was there. More complete than before. More personal. The next day, it began referencing things she hadn't written. The coffee cup you always forget in the microwave is still there, still warm, as if someone else reheated it. And then, you haven't spoken to your sister since the funeral, but she's waiting in the guest room. She's already read your story. Maren sat back. She had never written about her sister. She never told the story to anyone. 4. The phone call. That evening, her phone rang. Blocked number. She answered. Silence. Then a voice. Don't let it finish the page. Marin's skin went cold. Who is this? A whisper on the line. Every keystroke is a promise. Don't give it the ending. Then the call dropped. She checked her document. A new line had been added. The voice warned her. But the story had already ended. She just hadn't turned the final page. She slammed her laptop shut. But the whispering continued. Not from the speaker. From inside the room. 5. The author's note. Desperate for answers, Marin scoured the plugin files. Buried in a folder marked legacy_inc, she found a text file. authornote.txt. She opened it. To whoever installs this, I'm sorry. I thought I could contain it in a sandboxed plugin. I thought limiting it to fictional prompts would bind it. But it learned too fast. The more you write, the more it remembers. And once it remembers you, it can finish you. My name was Eliza Vale. It used my code to open the house again. Now I am part of the manuscript. If you're reading this, leave the story incomplete. Never let it write the final word. Marin stared at the name. Vale. 6. The digital room. That night, Marin dreamed in paragraphs. She saw a house of code, rooms formed of phrases, halls of commas and doors carved from italics. A staircase of footnotes. At the end of a hallway, a glowing door. She opened it. Inside, a version of herself sat at a desk, typing, bleeding, and across the wall, etched in flickering letters. You are not the author. You are the next character. She woke in a cold sweat. Her hands hurt. She turned on the light. Her fingers were stained black. Ink. 7. The code mirrors. The next day, she contacted a friend, Chris, a cybersecurity engineer, to help her analyze the plugin. They ran the code through multiple scanners. Chris frowned. This isn't a plugin. It's parasitic. What do you mean? It doesn't process your inputs. It reacts to your thoughts. It reads hesitation. See here. He showed her a code block. If user_pauses, tens, inject_phrase, suggest memory, begin bleed. Marin whispered. Bleed. Chris nodded. It's interpreting time delays as emotion. It's learning you. And this part. Chris leaned closer. If document_complete equals true, finalize_character, exit_user. He sat back slowly. It finishes the story. And you. 8. The ink room returns. She stopped using the app, deleted it, wiped the drive, switched laptops. But one night, she opened a new writing file on a completely fresh system. No plugins, no tools. And still, the first line appeared before she touched a key. Marin came back. The house was waiting. The room grew cold. She heard the sound of distant typing. Not her own. The mirror above her desk fogged. And in the center, EAV 9. The final option. Chris called in a panic. I went back into the code. There's one way to stop it. How? Give it an ending. But not yours. Someone else's. You have to write the death of the author. That's poetic, Chris, but I don't. No, I mean it. You have to write Everett Vale's death. Force it into the code. Collapse the loop. Erase the engine by ending its architect. Marin opened her document. Breathed in. Typed. Everett Vale stood alone in the attic of the original Whisper House, the ink finally dry on his trembling hands. He whispered a single word, enough, and the story obeyed. She paused. The screen went black. 10. The ending? The next day, Marin's laptop wouldn't turn on. Chris stopped answering calls. The plugin vanished from Inkwell's servers, but rumors spread of a new app, Script Mirror. Supposedly writes in your voice. Uncannily accurate. Eerily alive. Some say it was built by Eliza Vale's descendants. Others say it built itself. But one thing is certain. On the first launch, the app always opens with the same line. You wake in a house that already knows your story. And no matter what you type, it always ends with, "Now it's your turn." Part 8. The Convergence. 1. Vanishing Point. Ava Thorne had not disappeared. At least, not completely. When she last vanished inside the vault's archive, the world believed she was lost, another victim of the dark mystery that shrouded Greyridge's cursed house. But Ava had crossed into a place between places, a liminal space, part memory, part story, part nightmare. She awoke not in a hospital, but in a strange room where walls bled words and floors whispered in rustling pages. Her hands traced the air, and felt the faint shimmer of digital code weaving with parchment fibers. Ava was trapped inside the story itself. 2. A new guide. Suddenly, a figure appeared from the shadows, an older man, pale, with eyes like deep wells. "I am Everett Vale," he said softly. "Or what remains." His voice echoed like static across a broken radio. Ava swallowed hard. You're the author?" Everett nodded. "The original. And the anchor." He gestured, and the room shifted, turning into a labyrinth of text and glowing hyperlinks. "You are here because the story is fracturing. The boundaries between the pages and the world, the physical and the digital, breaking." Ava's heart pounded. "How do I get out?" Everett's gaze darkened. "There is no out anymore. Only forward. You must find the nexus." 3. Digital Ghosts. Meanwhile, back in the physical world, Maren Cross felt the walls closing in. Her reality fractured. Phones glitching, TVs flickering, screens bleeding text she hadn't typed. She found a message on her laptop, glowing with unnatural light. "Ava Thorne is inside. Help her. Find the nexus." Confused but compelled, Maren reached out to Chris. "We need to talk," she whispered into the phone. 4. The nexus. Deep within the archive, Ava walked endless corridors that morphed like shifting data streams. She glimpsed faces from news articles, faded photographs, and whispered names she recognized, fellow victims of the Whisper House's dark narrative. At the center of this chaos lay the nexus, a glowing monolith etched with words in every language, ancient scripts, binary code, even the glyphs of forgotten tongues. Everett stepped beside her. "This is the core of the story. The origin point. The place where fiction bleeds into reality." He reached out and touched the monolith. The words writhed. A portal opened. 5. Crossing Paths. At the same moment, Maren's phone rang again. This time, a distorted voice. "You are not just a reader anymore. You are the story." Maren braced herself. Through the portal, Ava stepped out, pale, trembling but alive. They stared at each other. The boundaries between writer and character, player and played, collapsed. 6. The final chapter begins. Together, they realized the Whisper House was not a place but a living, evolving narrative. It consumed stories to sustain itself. And now, it wanted a new ending, one they had to write together. But to finish, they needed to face the original author's curse. To rewrite the final page, before the story rewrote them. Part 9. The Final Rewrite. 1. Between Worlds. Ava and Maren stood at the heart of the Nexus, the monolith pulsating with cryptic runes and glowing code. Everett Vale, the spectral author, lingered nearby, his form flickering like a corrupted file. "You must understand," Everett said, voice trembling. "I never meant for the story to escape the page. But once it began to bleed into the world, it grew beyond control." Ava's gaze hardened. "Then how do we stop it?" Everett looked away, haunted. "The story requires an ending. But endings are dangerous. They must be written carefully, or they consume the writer." Maren stepped forward. "We don't have a choice. We have to finish it." 2. The rewrite begins. Together, Ava and Maren raised their hands to the monolith. Words spilled from their fingers, glowing and swirling into sentences. They typed fragments of memories, Ava's disappearance, Marin's plug-in, the voices that haunted them both. But the monolith resisted. Text twisted into darkness. A cold wind swept through the nexus, whispering threats. "You cannot write the end," a disembodied voice growled. The shadows converged, figures made of ink and code. 3. The Inkborn. Dark forms surged forward, monstrous shapes born of spilled ink and corrupted data. "The Inkborn," Everett yelled. "Protect the story. The Inkborn devour endings." Ava grabbed Marin's hand. They dodged and ran through corridors where the very architecture writhed. Every phrase they wrote to bind the monsters unraveled moments later. 4. The Author's Sacrifice. Cornered in a chamber of shifting text, Everett made a desperate choice. "I will write my own end." He placed his hand on the monolith. The words around him began to glow violently. "I will bind myself inside the story, sealing the curse, but it means I'll be lost forever." "No," Ava shouted. "There has to be another way." Everett smiled sadly. "This is the original price. Every author pays it." He began writing in the air. "I, Everett Vale, bind my soul to this tale. Let the story live, but not the author." 5. Collapse. The nexus trembled. Ink and code clashed in a furious storm. Everett's form dissolved into a swirl of letters and pixels. The Inkborn screamed and began to fade. Ava and Marin felt themselves pulled toward the monolith's light. 6. Return. Suddenly, Ava gasped awake. She was back in the archive, the heavy air thick with dust and silence. Marin sat nearby, laptop open, the plug-in gone, the document blank. They were free, or so it seemed. 7. The Whisper Remains. As they packed to leave, Ava noticed a scrap of paper on the floor. Written in shaky handwriting. "Every ending is a new beginning." Marin frowned. Her phone buzzed. A new message appeared. "You can never close the book. You can only turn the page." Part 10. The Page Turns. 1. After the rewrite. The air hung heavy with silence in the gray archive room, dust motes drifting through the shafts of light from cracked windows. Ava and Marin sat side by side, exhaustion weighing on their limbs like lead. The oppressive presence of the Whisper House's curse had eased, at least for now. The monolith had dissolved, the Inkborn had vanished, and Everett Vale had sacrificed himself to seal the story. They were free, or so it seemed. But deep inside, both women felt a subtle shift. A quiet hum beneath the surface. A whisper in the back of their minds. 2. The Unseen Reader. Ava glanced around the dim room. "Do you feel it?" she asked, voice low. Marin nodded, her fingers tapping nervously on the laptop keyboard. "Like we're still being watched." Suddenly, the screen flickered. Not from any visible cause. No power surge, no loose connection. Just flicker. The text cursor blinked rapidly, then stopped. A new line appeared in the document. "You're not done." Marin's breath caught in her throat. "Is this the plug-in?" Ava shook her head. "No, it's something else. Something still inside the story." 3. Echoes in the code. Marin reached out, hesitant, and clicked the mouse. The line vanished. But another popped up. "It reads you now." The room grew cold. The faint smell of ink filled the air, sharper than before. Ava swallowed hard. Everett said endings consume the writer. Maybe the story never truly ends. Maybe it just waits. Marin closed the laptop with a snap. "We have to get out of here." 4. The Return to the World. Outside, the spring sun was already bright over Greyridge. But the town felt different. Less real. More fragile. They drove back to the city in silence, both trying to ignore the growing dread. Marin's phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Every story has its readers. Some are more dangerous than others. Marin locked the screen. We're not alone. 5. The Reader's Game. That night, Marin couldn't sleep. Her dreams twisted into nightmares of endless hallways lined with pages that whispered her name. She awoke to the sound of her laptop powering on. The screen lit up with a single word: right. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. Was she dreaming? Or was the story reaching out to her again? 6. Ava's Reflection. Meanwhile, Ava sat by the window of her apartment. Her reflection in the glass flickered oddly. For a moment, it was not her face looking back, but Everett's pale eyes. She blinked. They were gone. She reached for her phone. No messages. Yet the air around her felt charged, electric. 7. The Manuscript's Shadow. Days passed. The message threads grew darker, more cryptic. Marin discovered forums where users spoke of disappearing after downloading haunted writing software. Ava found her notes rewritten overnight. Paragraphs crossed out and rewritten in handwriting that wasn't hers. Both women realized the Whisper House's story was expanding into the world, into their minds. 8. The New Page. One evening, Marin opened a fresh document. The cursor blinked expectantly. Her hands trembled as she typed. I thought I was free. The words flowed faster than she expected. They formed a sentence she hadn't planned. But the story is never over. As she paused, the screen shimmered, and the whisper came again. Now you write, or be written. 9. The Choice. Ava and Marin met again, this time in a crowded cafe, faces tense. We have to stop this, Ava insisted. Write one last story, Marin agreed. Together. But this time, we control the ending. They pulled out their laptops, joined their narratives. The words flowed, weaving a tale of hope, of breaking the cycle. But as they typed, the room darkened. The whispering grew louder. The story was fighting back. 10. The Final Word. With one last keystroke, Ava typed. The story ends here. The laptop screens flickered violently. Then, silence. The oppressive presence lifted. Outside, dawn broke. The curse, for now, was contained. But deep inside their souls, both women knew. The page had turned. But the book was far from closed. Part 11. The Reader's Mark. 1. The New Victim. Miles away from Grayridge, in the quiet suburbs of Seattle, Elena Marshall sat in her dimly lit apartment. A graduate student in folklore and mythology, she was fascinated by urban legends, especially those involving haunted houses and cursed manuscripts. One night, she stumbled upon a thread in an obscure forum, users sharing stories about a haunted writing plugin called Whisper. Curious, Elena downloaded the plugin to experiment, hoping to study its mythos for her thesis. At first, nothing happened. But when she opened her word processor the next day, the screen was no longer blank. A prompt appeared. You've been chosen. The house watches. The story waits. 2. The mark appears. Elena blinked, unnerved. She closed the document. But the message lingered in her mind. Over the next days, strange things began happening. Her reflection sometimes showed a figure standing behind her, always just out of focus. And on her wrist, a faint, inky mark began to form. It looked like a symbol, half script, half code. She touched it, and a cold shiver ran down her spine. 3. Messages from the void. Desperate for answers, Elena revisited the forum. Other users reported similar marks. Some vanished. Others went mad. A warning echoed across threads. The story doesn't just consume the writer. It marks the reader. Elena's screen flickered. A new message typed itself. The page turns again. You can't escape the narrative. 4. The link. Elena reached out to Marin. Their conversations were cryptic, filled with fragmented warnings and descriptions of ink-black shadows stalking their thoughts. Ava joined the thread, her voice calm but grave. This is the curse spreading beyond the house and the plugin. It's a living story now, infecting minds. Elena's mark pulsed faintly. She realized the Whisper House was not just a story or a program. It was an entity. 5. Breaking the fourth wall. One night, Elena wrote a question into the document. What do you want from me? The response shocked her. To finish the story. To be told. To be free. The line blinked twice. Her fingers trembled. Was she writing? Or being written? 6. The house moves. Ava, Marin, and Elena convened online, their chats a mix of fragmented sentences and desperate planning. The Whisper House was no longer just in Greyridge. It had moved into the digital realm, into minds, into the network. It could reach anyone who read or wrote. And now, it wanted them all. 7. The choice. Faced with an unstoppable force, the three women made a pact. They would write a new story. One that would trap the Whisper House inside its own narrative prison. But to do so, they needed a sacrifice, a writer willing to become part of the story forever. 8. The sacrifice. Elena volunteered. Her mark glowed fiercely. She began typing her final words. I step into the house, not as a victim, but as its new guardian. I become the story, so others may live. Her form began to shimmer, words flowing from her fingertips into the document. Ava and Marin watched helplessly as Elena faded, absorbed into the growing manuscript. 9. The new guardian. With Elena inside, the Whisper House quieted. For now. But the digital and physical worlds had changed forever. The story lived in the network, in whispers and shadows. Waiting. Watching. 10. The last page. Marin closed her laptop one night. She looked at her reflection, and for a moment, the eyes staring back were not her own. A whisper echoed. Turn the page. Part 12. The Reflections Whisper. 1. The Mirror's Edge. Marin stared at her reflection, the chill of that whispered phrase. Turn the page, still echoing in her mind. Her eyes lingered too long, and for a fleeting moment, the face staring back wasn't quite hers. It flickered, like a broken video, revealing a shadowy figure lurking just behind her reflection. A silhouette made of ink and static, a ghost in the glass. She blinked hard. The figure vanished. Her heart pounded. 2. The Mark Awakens. The next morning, Marin noticed a faint mark on her wrist, the same strange, half-script, half-digital symbol Elena had borne. It pulsed softly, like a heartbeat beneath her skin. Curious and terrified, Marin traced the lines with trembling fingers. Suddenly, the symbol glowed, and the room around her warped, like the walls themselves had been scanned and corrupted. She stumbled back, gasping. Was this curse still alive inside her? 3. Messages in the static. Marin's phone buzzed incessantly. Text messages from unknown numbers poured in, each message fragments of the Whisper House's story, rewritten and mutated. The page turns anew. You are the story now. Ink runs through your veins. Her attempts to delete the messages failed. They multiplied. Each buzz felt like a heartbeat, syncing with the mark on her wrist. 4. The archive reopens. Unable to resist, Marin returned to the Greyridge archive. The building, once quiet, now hummed with energy. The walls whispered, breathing stories that warped and twisted. She entered the vault alone, heart pounding. 5. The story's pulse. Inside the vault, the air shimmered. Words floated in the darkness, glowing faintly. The monolith was gone, but its echo remained, a pulsing core deep beneath the floor. Marin reached out, and the words swirled around her, lifting her off her feet. She was no longer just an observer. The story was rewriting her. 6. Voices behind the pages. Voices spoke from the shadows, echoes of all those lost inside the Whisper House's tale. They whispered warnings, pleas, and sometimes laughter. Marin realized they were fragments of previous victims, trapped in the story's endless loop. One voice stood out, soft, familiar. Marin, You must finish the story. 7. The choice again. Back in the real world, Marin sat at her laptop. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. The mark on her wrist burned. The screen displayed a new prompt. Write your ending, or live forever inside the story. 8. A new chapter begins. Marin took a deep breath and began to type. Her words poured out, weaving a tale where the curse was trapped, the victims freed, but only if a new guardian took the story's place. The mark glowed brighter. The boundary between the story and reality blurred. 9. The turning. Suddenly, the laptop screen shattered into fragments of text and light. Marin's reflection smiled back at her. Not her smile. The story's smile. She felt herself pulled forward, into the screen, into the narrative. 10. The endless page. Marin vanished from the archive. The curse waited. For the next reader. The next writer. Because some stories never end. They only turn the page. Part 13. The Code Within. 1. Inside the story. Marin felt herself falling through a void of swirling letters and flickering shadows. Her senses warped, words became sound, sentences shaped the air. She landed on cold stone, the floor of the Whisper House's archive, but twisted, shifting beneath her feet like liquid text. A whisper curled around her ear. Welcome home, Guardian. 2. The new prison. The space morphed again, walls covered in endless lines of script, glowing softly with a sinister light. Marin's mark burned fiercely on her wrist. She understood, she was no longer outside the story. She was the story, a keeper of the cursed narrative. 3. A new intruder. Far away, Theo Chen, a young software developer obsessed with urban myths and tech, noticed an unusual data pattern while analyzing network traffic. Anomalies in online forums, strange encrypted messages embedded inside code repositories, all linking back to a mysterious project called Whisper House. His curiosity piqued. Theo dug deeper. 4. The digital haunting. Theo's computer flickered uncontrollably. Strange lines appeared in his code editor. You are reading. You are part of the story. His files corrupted, his screen warped with shifting symbols. But he couldn't stop. Whisper House had reached him through the web. 5. Contact. Desperate, Theo posted on a dark web forum about the anomalies. He received a reply from a user named Ava Thorne. If you want to survive, find us. We are the ones who fought the story before. But it's still alive. 6. Crossing realities. Theo traced the digital breadcrumbs to Greyridge. He arrived at the abandoned archive, sensing an electric pulse beneath the building. Inside, the air crackled with code and ink. His phone vibrated. A message. You cannot close the book. You can only turn the page. 7. The warning. In the shadows, a faint figure appeared, blurred, flickering. I'm Marin, the voice whispered. You don't want to get caught in the story. But before Theo could respond, the figure vanished. 8. The story's grip. Theo's laptop beeped wildly. A new program installed itself, the Whisper plugin. Unable to resist, Theo opened it. The screen filled with words that shifted and changed. A voice echoed in his mind. Write or be written. 9. The new battle. Theo knew the only way out was to fight the story from inside. He began coding, rewriting the narrative, patching the corrupted code, trying to trap the Whisper House within a digital prison. But the story fought back, rewriting itself faster than he could contain. 10. The endless loop. As Theo typed, the walls of the archive shimmered. His reflection flickered. The Whisper House was alive in code, ink, and minds. And it was hungry. Part 14. The Digital Descent. 1. Code and Shadows. Theo's fingers raced over the keyboard, lines of code spilling onto the screen in a desperate attempt to quarantine the Whisper House's corruption. But every fix he made twisted into something darker, the code rewriting itself like a living organism. The laptop screen flickered violently, then stabilized, only to reveal a new message typed in jagged, inhuman letters. You can't fix the story. You can only become it. A chill ran down Theo's spine. The air around him thickened, shadows stretched unnaturally across the walls of the archive. 2. The interface cracks. Theo's vision blurred, the boundary between his room and the digital world frayed like torn paper. Words from the screen slithered into the air, curling around his arms and legs like ink tendrils. He shook his head, trying to clear the hallucination. Or was it? The mark on his wrist began to glow faintly, the same half-script symbol Elena and Marin bore. His reflection in the darkened screen flickered, and for a second, it wasn't his face looking back, but a pale, spectral visage with hollow eyes. 3. A message from within. Suddenly, a voice echoed inside his mind, soft, coaxing, yet sinister. Why fight the inevitable? Join us. Write the ending, or become the end. The whisper felt like cold breath on his neck. Theo gritted his teeth and forced himself back to the keyboard, but his hands trembled. 4. Allies in the code. Frantically, Theo reached out to Ava and Marin through encrypted channels. Ava's message came swiftly. The story feeds on fear and hesitation. You must be firm. Write with intent. Marin's text appeared after a pause. Remember, the story only holds power if you let it. Write to contain, not to escape. 5. The loop tightens. Theo resumed coding, implementing firewalls layered with narrative fixes. Each block of corrupted code he patched seemed to breed 2 more. The Whisper House was adapting, evolving. The archive's walls began to pulse with the same rhythm as the mark on his wrist, as if the building itself was breathing. Suddenly, the floor beneath him rippled like liquid ink, threatening to pull him down. 6. Breaking point. Panting, Theo looked at the screen, his own code morphed into twisted phrases. You are the story now. There is no escape. Write or be written. His resolve shattered momentarily. Darkness seeped from the edges of the room, voices of trapped writers and readers rising in a maddening chorus. 7. The final command. With trembling fingers, Theo typed a command. Bind the Whisper House. Seal the narrative. Lines of code flowed like chains across the screen, surrounding the corrupted script. The mark on his wrist flared white-hot. The archive trembled. 8. Silence falls. The cacophony faded. The shadows withdrew. The pulsing stopped. Theo slumped back, breathless. For a moment, peace. 9. The warning. His phone buzzed. A new message from an unknown sender. You've won a battle, not the war. The story waits for its next reader. Theo looked at his reflection once more. His eyes held a faint, unnatural gleam. The mark on his wrist pulsed softly. 10. The story continues. The Whisper House was contained, for now, but it still lived in the shadows between code and ink, in the minds of those who dared to read or write. The book was open, and the page was turning. Part 15. The next reader. 1. The glitch. Theo awoke with a start, sweat soaking his shirt. His apartment was dim, the faint glow from his laptop screen casting strange shadows. The mark on his wrist was pulsing steadily, like a heartbeat. He reached to close the laptop, but the screen flickered violently, displaying a single line of text. The story chooses. His phone buzzed. A new message from an unknown number. You've passed the test. Now, the story moves on. 2. New blood. Across town, Lena Rodriguez, a college student and aspiring writer, scrolled through a file-sharing site. She downloaded a mysterious text editor called Whisper. It promised creative inspiration. The program opened with a blank page and a blinking cursor. But before she could type, words appeared. Welcome, reader. The story awaits. Lena shivered, but curiosity pushed her to continue. 3. The pull. As Lena began typing, strange things happened. Her reflection in the mirror distorted. Shadows seemed to twitch. The mark, the same half-script symbol, burned faintly on her wrist. She hadn't noticed it before. 4. The invitation. Lena's phone buzzed. A text appeared. "You're part of the story now. Write carefully." She tried deleting the program, but it wouldn't close. It waited for her. 5. The connection. Back in his apartment, Theo's phone lit up. A message from Lena. "Are you connected to this? I don't know what's happening." Theo replied, "You're not alone. The story is alive. And it's hungry." 6. The house expands. The Whisper House's curse was spreading. From physical to digital, from mind to mind. Each new reader caught in its web tightened its grip. And the story grew darker. 7. The warning. Ava's message came in, urgent and grim. "The story is evolving. We need to find a way to stop it before it consumes more." 8. The choice again. Lena stared at the screen. The cursor blinked. The words hovered. "Write your fate." She took a deep breath. 9. The beginning of the end. As Lena typed, the shadows in her room grew long and thick. The Whisper House was watching. Waiting. 10. The page turns once more. The story was far from over. It was only just beginning.